So yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk to everyone in this context. What I'm going to talk about today are the challenges of building an institution nested within an institution, nested within an institution, and etc. And preserving and sharing as many of the values as possible that I want to promote, and creating a space and a context for fertile creativity and experimentation within those nested institutions. I'm going to talk about the UCLA Game Lab, which is a nested institution. It's up on the third floor. This is the unwrapped version. It doesn't quite get that big in real life, but there's Tyler right there. Sometimes there's more people in there. I'm going to talk about kind of a little bit about the lab and how it's positioned in different ways. So I like to think of the UCLA Game Lab as a kind of gray ops operation within GMA, within UCLA, within the School of Arts and Architecture. And these are a few of the values and ideas that guide the lab. One is it's important that the lab is public facing. A lot of academic sub-institutions slowly, if not at the onset, bubble into a kind of academic bubble and forget about public facedness. So I see the lab as very much a public facing institution. We do a lot of shows outside of this context geographically, and also try to spread things out in the virtual world. The lab is a place about art and experiences and experiments primarily. I'm reluctant to call the lab, I would say, is reluctant to call everything that is done research and conform to the disciplinary expectations that come with being a space inside of a research university. A lot of art in these spaces gets called research to justify its existence, and I think this is a terrible disservice to what art and creativity can and should be. And I think most importantly, by far, is the lab is a place to embrace multiple points of view simultaneously. So technologist and Luddite, I think we try to keep both of those ideologies in place at the same time. Playful, fanciful, and serious at the same time. Idealist and pragmatist. Champion versus skeptic. And lawful and chaotic. Just a little bit about kind of how it's a little hard for, at first it was hard for me coming from a more free context for doing my work as an artist out and about in the world. I used to run an artist-run space called Sea Level in Chinatown, which kind of, we did a lot of different free-form art technology experiments. And coming to an institution, it was difficult to see whether I could preserve some of those ethos within this institution. So these are some examples of some projects. This is Crumb Lord, which is a project I did in the Game Lab as part of our food game jam dinner, which was a 3-day event of 12 meals in a row that were playable. That's some of us playing it in the Game Lab. This is an example of kind of projects that I work on. So Vietnam Romance is a project I've been working on for 4 years. And I'm going to talk about instrumentalization in a minute. But this was an example for me of a kind of project that is often very hard for me to position in the world, because it's a game, but it's not marketed. It's a computer game, but it's not distributed. It's a political work, but it doesn't have a clear ideological point of view that's easy to explain. It's fun, but it's also very unfun. It's permanent, but it's also impermanent. It's finished, but it's not finished. So there's a lot of ideas that go into making work that are hard to translate to structures such as institutions, but we're trying. And this is just the end of that. So this is the Game Lab's website for people who are interested in seeing more of what we do. It's at games.ucla.edu, and if there's a little minute or so, I can show you a sampling. A few examples of projects from the lab that I feel represent some of this conflation of ideologies. John Brumley's Guattari Hero, which is really a kind of strange navigation of Amazon's barcode system as a sound music installation game. Check it out, it's strange. Sophia Staub's Junk game about capitalism and heroin, which is a playable multiplayer game with this GUI electronic interface. John Brumley again and Alex Ricketts, Software, Etc., a really wonderful project about exploring a mall with strange creatures that you can text through your phone by wiggling your hand around the screen. And many more projects, which hopefully we'll get to for a minute at least. But here's kind of the core of what I wanted to talk about. It's a little bit of a practical thing for any of you who might be interested in creating spaces in the future and avoiding or finding really your space. So this is a Venn diagram I drew to try to show where the lab exists. And as opposed to existing in the intersection of these three worlds, which the lab is actually very connected to, I find that it exists in between all of them. And at first this was very challenging, but now I see this as a really sacred space to preserve. And the lack of overlap is really important. And if you see these three worlds, they're all related to games. So the art world, because we do a lot of games and art in the Game Lab, which the art world is quite suspicious of technology in general, new technology. The game industry, which loves technology and would love something like a Game Lab in the institution, but doesn't really like what we do. Usually, because they say we already do this stuff and all the rest is just useless and no one's going to get a job and we're not going to give you money. And then there's probably the more challenging world to interface with, which is a new big part of gaming in institutions, which is useful games, games that do something useful. And I'll talk about all these a little bit, but in some ways I value each and one of these, even though this seems a little negative and cynical. I really value a lot of each one of these three areas, you know. I even have notes of what I value about them. I can read those to you. For instance, I love art for art's sake, and I love eccentricity and idiosyncrasy. In the useful game section, I love polemics and a commitment to activism. And from the game industry, I love the joy and wonder that some large-scale games offer and the focus on craft and rigor that that world brings to us. But what happens is I feel that each one of these spaces where games exist have come to instrumentalize games and try to conform them and use them for some other purpose. For instance, education, therapy, social change, those are all really wonderful, valuable things to do. I call these benign instrumentalization of games. They're basically looking for games as a tool, like a video could be used to teach something. And the more malignant version, which is gamification, advergaming, manipulation, addiction, sort of using games on the dark side. There's been a lot of literature, this is just a very small sampling, about how great games are, how you can do so much with them, and they solve so many problems. And this particular kind of twist right now comes from the history of demonizing games, so it's a kind of overreaction. Talk about that a little bit if we have time. Problem with the art world's relationship, in a sense, is that games are seen as technology. Tech is not art. Why would we support this? We should support the arts that help support, that need support, and tech art and entertainment already have support. So why would we support this kind of art when we really should be supporting violins and painting and poetry? This is another challenge. And then the game industry, which I really see as, these are the negative sides, I suppose, but pipelines of people is what they're interested in, pipelines of technology, and games as commodity. So these are part of the problems of interfacing with the game industry, is they very much want to instrumentalize academia in this case. There's some pipelines. A really brief history of instrumentalization in the case of games. Games used to be just games. No one cared about them. There weren't too much thinking about them. Computer games came along, and a little bit before that, D&D a little bit, but games were bad for a while. They were addictive. They were, caused violence. They did all kinds of bad things. And now we're kind of in the games are good again phase. Games will teach children how to use a lot of technology, and they'll get good at computers, and the games are going to fix the world, and let's like reclaim this space to be really useful. And that's kind of the main real instrumentalization that's happening with games that I'm somewhat disturbed by, because it's all over the place. Pretty much almost every game lab I interface with all over the world, this is what they end up doing with their labs. They build the labs so that they operate within this third category, that games are somehow a great thing and that they should be funded, and that that's why we need games, because they are part of the future in a very positive way. And I don't think so. Another brief history of instrumentalization. Who cares about silly games? At first, then games are the future. Cinema is dead. Games are the medium of the future. Games are where all the money is. Let's get everyone into games and technology at the same time. Isn't that great? And you see these kinds of narratives all over the place about money. It's the ludic century. It's the death of narrative. It's the era of games, yada, yada, yada. And the last sort of brief history of instrumentalization here, which is games are fun. Games are here so we can escape the world. Games let us escape ourselves. And this kind of instrumentalization also limits games in a sense. In some ways, it's sort of saying they are entertainment, they are escapism, they shouldn't be anything else. So I think I don't really have like a positive ending to this talk, but I thought I probably should. So this is kind of positive, but I feel like, and I mean, this is kind of a trick, I guess. For me to preserve this space that I value, it's important for me not to stake a claim in any of those three spaces, and to still look at games as a medium that hopefully has a tremendous amount of potential to be explored. And we should keep exploring it more, but who really knows what it can do? But I think it's really important to kind of hold your breath and hold your commitment to what it is all about. and take all aspects of them and try to allow them to intermingle. I think that's the kind of magic of it when it can happen. Maybe to wrap up, we do all kinds of other stuff in the lab too. So we do talks, we produce software, we do events, workshops, tutorials, tools for artists, game jams, all kinds of things. So that's about it. But yeah, thanks.